Well, damn, dude, when you say it like that, yeah, it's the middle management.
And I was like, oh, this is like, and I just had never thought of using Claude Code like that. But to my point is, okay, do I ever need to use Postman again?
You're like, why is this data garbage? I can't forecast like this. It's like, oh, well, you didn't employ like 5 people, spend all month all massaging this and getting it lined up because our systems are broke. Well, Google went from can't ship anything to shipping a complete agent platform in like less than a year. For me, that compressed what could easily be a 10 to 20 hour activity if you factor in everyone's time to like sub fives, maybe even less than 4. And my confidence level goes up in the execution. And now I can focus on other things. Like, what am I going to have for lunch?
Sorry.
Couldn't. Yeah,
No, that,
you sent
yeah.
me a lot. I think I read most of them. So
Yeah. Well, the one, the interesting one, the Cloudflare CEO opinion piece in the WSJ, he labeled his, like his framework of three. Like you got your engineers, you've got your sellers. So your engineers and your builders, your sellers who your, salespeople. And then you have your measures, and your measures are middle management, HR, finance, and he said analytics. So maybe that's BI tooling. I don't know, like your analyst, I guess. But he said he cut the measures, and all companies are cutting the measures, mainly the middle managers. And the narrative sort of holds because the whole, I don't know if you're like paying attention to the Meta layoffs this week. They said the majority of those layoffs were middle managers. So it's
yeah,
like, we've talked about it before. Like, once the AI gets there, you'll be able to orchestrate. So as an IC, you can orchestrate. Like, you really think about it. Like, what do middle managers do? Like, the ICs report up to them, and then they aggregate the reports and report up to leadership. So it's like, where's the value add in that?
well, damn, dude, when you say it like that, yeah, it's the middle management. Uh, Amazon's definitely they've been on a mission for the past couple of years to flatten the org, and so we've increased the ratio of ICs to managers. I haven't really noticed a difference. I'm not a manager, so but I mean, I'm one of those people that a one-on-one weekly one-on-one is almost overkill because if I need something, I'm just gonna call you, right? So like having a standing one-on-one is kind of like what are we doing here? Unless it's some sort of workshop thing. Otherwise, it's like, what have you been up to? It's like you can working. Like, like dashboards over there. That's my revenue, and I've been working towards revenue because more revenue equals more money.
Yeah.
You've been doing fucking, and usually it's just some sort of like housekeeping bullshit. Just fire drill, optics, things like that. And but I don't know, man. I've gotten feedback most of my career that it's like, oh, Quinn's kind of like the lightest touch on the team. So I'm not saying there isn't value because I know there are people that on ICs that just they consume a lot of the manager cycles and they need the help and they need the coaching. But I guess it kind of begs the question, what's going to happen to those ICs if you need that much coaching and you can't function without middle management help? Like that's not great either.
Think there was, and that actually touches on one of, like, people do the, like the retweet or the commenting, and like, and actually there was one for the one just laid off yesterday where he was defending the CEO because everybody was like, oh, you're creating Hunger Games. And, but to your point, like
What the
the, the CEO was like, hey, we're rewarding high impact, high agency
yeah.
teammates. And
Is this the
so,
ClickUp?
yeah. And so it's like, if those individuals are worth their weight in gold, they should be paid that.
Yeah.
And to your point, it's like, are we just cutting through sorry, my neighbor's doing construction. I don't know if you can hear that. Hear that? No,
Yeah.
no, it's not.
A little bit, but
Yeah. Okay. I can hear it loud, but anyways, so, but to the point, it's like the high agency. So, you know, that sort of also removes the political nature of like these middle managers and like, oh, I need to become a higher, LX, whatever, L10, L4, L5. Because if you have agency, you're not dependent upon a middle manager to help you do your job, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I there's so many layers and it's so nuanced because it's one butterfly wings flapping in Indonesia causes hurricanes somewhere else. So you've got high agency people in that example, so you don't need middle management. But I think it's predicated on an assumption that senior leaders are somehow right slash omnipotent, and I don't think they understand because they're so disconnected from both the day to day as well as how much filtering is happening through middle management. They're like, why is this data garbage? I can't forecast like this. It's like, oh, well, you didn't employ like 5 fucking people, spend all month all massaging this and getting it lined up because our systems are broke. So I wonder, I think it's kind of like an experiment, right? Because you're going to see what works or what doesn't. But I do have some great quotes because you sent me that I read. I was like, okay, I really like this. Like a lot of this, at least, is indicative of the mental model. So is it cool if I read these and I want to get your thoughts on them? Because I think you've read them too. So, and this is from the ClickUp tweet post. So just kind of the sections, the 10x builders, which is now the 100x builders, essentially is what he's saying. The wrong strategy is to push every engineer to use infinite tokens. Companies doing this are celebrating 500,000 or 500,000, 500% more pull requests or PRs. But customer outcomes don't match the volume of code being generated, right? i.e. revenue. I call this the great reckoning of AI coding, and every company will face this soon, if not already. So, like, one, I thought that was super interesting. Two, the 10x builder for product managers. Everything outside of managing systems, orchestrating AI, and reviewing output becomes a bottleneck. It's like, all right, because I think basically we're just going to run into the whole theory of constraints. So I do think system management is going to be really important. You got the frontliners. That's Doom and Quinn here. So Doom and Devery, we should call it D&D. In a world that will become saturated with AI communication, the human touch will matter more than anything to customers. This is a bottleneck that you should not replace, even when agents are high enough to do video meetings, high enough quality to do video meetings. And then lastly, this is what you're talking about, compensation incentives is what I put down here. So they are introducing a 1 million cash/year salary bands with a path available to nearly everyone in the company if they produce 100x impact by creating or managing AI systems. And my comment is 100x output for 10x the pay. Like that sounds like that's obviously a slam dunk. Like what CEO wouldn't do that? But my question is, if you can do 100x, wouldn't you just start your own job or your own company? Like why would you do? So I get the math, but I don't know that it's just like all the gains are going to go to capital. So those are some of the excerpts that I thought were super interesting from what you said. So what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah. I
What's
think
right, wrong?
no, I mean, I think the last anecdote about like the, you know, 100x performance equals 10x pay. And then your comment, like, well, why wouldn't they just go start their own? I think too, maybe with with all of these like layoffs and like the analogy just going back to like, oh, the high agency, high performer. And then the other one where I think the one found just raised 30 million. Maybe there's just this world of new business where you don't need 5 people to massage the data, because the agents can help you because you're running a, $100 million ARR business, which can be done by 5 people. Now, mind you, that group of 5 people, then maybe we were building a future of like just acquisitions to roll up to one big oligopoly of some sort. But, those businesses then may become businesses in other businesses. But I think the point is like, yeah, you might not need all these layer management. And yeah, you could go start your business if you're 10xing, but if you're just a 7 to 20 person team, 30 people team, maybe that's fine. Maybe $1 million, working on a 30 person team is perfectly copacetic and you don't need to go try and do your own thing.
$1 million is a lot. It's just 500,000 goes to taxes because it's earned income.
Yeah.
So Yeah, that's not ideal. Well, cool, man. Let's break into the headlines. So I'm going to read a couple of these headlines that came out this week. Super interesting. We had Google I/O, the SaaStr 2016 conference. So I'll read these and then I would love to get your thoughts. So Google I/O 2026, the week's biggest event. So now they've, I think, gosh, I forget their other conference. So agent space is moving so fast. Everybody has essentially two kind of like announcements per year. So like last year for AWS, you had reInvent obviously, but then also a bunch of announcements at New York Summit. So we're seeing this trend. But you had Gemini 3.5 series, including Flash and Omni-tier, Anti-Gravity 2.0, a new Anti-Gravity CLI, managed agents. It's kind of like just like a scatter plot of just like all these different releases. And it's almost difficult to kind of catch everything. But one of the quotes in the blog on all the announcements was from, I think it was Suchar, the CEO. He said, Google's top cloud customers process around 1 trillion tokens per day. If these customers shifted 80% of their workloads to Gemini 3.flash, so essentially implement a router instead of just hammering their frontier models of everybody, they'd save over $1 billion annually. I was like, holy crap. So the next one up, we got Google is dethroning OpenAI as a consumer AI, which I thought was pretty interesting. What else we got here? Cursor shipped Composer 2.5. Strongest model yet, discloses training a much larger from scratch model with SpaceX AI. So using 10x more compute on Colossus 2. It's pretty crazy. SaaStr AI Annual 2026 had over 12,500 attendees. Is a great session on YouTube. I think it's 3 hours plus. Lots of like CROs and founders talking about how they're implementing AI and GTM. We'll talk a little bit about that. Kyle Poyer mapped the GTM hiring market. Job postings are actually down 50%, 1.5 year over year. SDR posts are down 21%, but AI native companies more than doubled. SDR headcount and GTM engineering headcount doubled. So customer support is the real casualty, down 37%. So I feel like there's a lot of conflicting data out there because I've seen other articles talk about customer success or support roles going up. So those are the kind of the ones that caught my eyes. Oh, here we go. This is Layoff Watch. Intuit and Meta both announced cuts with big layoffs. Meanwhile, the pragmatic engineer reports forward deployed engineers heating up at Google, OpenAI, and Anthropic. So not a shock there. The labs are hiring the deployment role, even as other companies are, laying off people for cost cutting or so they can fund, GPU purchases. But what stands out to you, man?
Yeah. I mean, as always, just like the fire hose of information. It was a random anecdote, but like the Google I/O, like usually I see that on my timeline. I didn't see much of it. So I don't know if the algorithms are just bearing it because I saw more Claude stuff this week than Google.
Is Twitter good on news or is it good on water cooler talk? Because I felt like the zeitgeist was around Andrew Karpathy joining Anthropic. Was that what was on Twitter?
Yeah, there's that. And just, I guess, layoffs, but I think the algorithms are just, in general, broke. Just give you what you assume. Like,
Maybe, but also I think humans are just so bombarded. I think the percentage of people who are AI pilled that would like really keep on the edge of stuff, even know any idea is small. And then the people who are actually staying on top of the frontier stuff that's being released is even smaller. And I think everyone's just being numb. And if you think about human dynamics, it's way more fun to talk about the drama of who's joining what company and they used to work for OpenAI and this person got laid off. And it's like, I don't know why women love, was it ID and like cold killer cases and reality TV? I hate drama, but they love to watch other people's train wrecks. I don't fucking know, but that's what it feels like Twitter is. So
yeah, no, spot on. Yeah. I think another, like one of the comments from the FDE or deployed engineers and then the layoffs of other engineers everywhere. I definitely have seen I don't want to call it the hype cycle or the like FDE is like the new shiny object. But my question, and when I think of FDEs, and then feel free to like push here, is I think of analogous to almost like solution architects or individuals who can put hands on keyboard, but also have like business and like acumen of like working backwards with customers. So are all these engineers that are quote unquote getting laid off like purpose built to be able to be forward deployed engineers? Can't hear you. I think you're on.
My bad. So you're saying they're all these people are purpose built almost to be forward deploy engineers?
Oh, no, are they like, because
Uh,
there's like different sections of engineers. You have engineers who are straight up like hoodies, Birkenstocks, don't want to talk to anybody. Like,
yeah.
but then you have like your, let's call them solution architect SAs, which you could say are retired engineers or people who just want to be more like talk with the customers, but can also do hands-on keyboard. So when we see, oh, there's a swath of layoffs and engineers or programmers or devs are getting fired, are they, do they have the acumen or do they have the abilities to be forward deployed engineers? Right? Like people say like, oh, well, one door closes, another opens, but maybe that door is not the door they're fit for.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I don't know any forward deployed engineers, but my one thought is kind of professional services. You typically have kind of a lead partner type or like team lead who's a little more customer facing or PM role, and then they staff the other engineers. This one's a UI expert, design, front end, back end, database. So I could see how they could fit in there, but it doesn't make you wonder, are forward deployed engineers kind of the generalists that can talk to customers, and then all of those sub specialties are just agents? So back to your point, it's like, they're going to have to upskill to become more of a generalist and develop people skills. It's like, stop wearing fucking slides with socks to work, bro. I think that's what I saw this week, man. I was just like, really? It's like, you give zero fucks? I guess so.
But yeah,
You
so
can't see your feet. So,
yeah, I don't wear socks, but I do wear the slippers or what we, flip flops on the
but
mainland.
you got to pick it, dude. And you're not walking to a corporate office. I'm not hating on flip flop. I love flip flops.
Yeah.
If you like slot, it's just, you're in an office. You're in a corporate office, dude. Like, I don't want to see your toes.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I hear you. Yeah. Yeah, it is interesting, but yeah, that was just an observation. Yeah. The lots of like, yeah, things are changing, but yeah, I don't know if every engineer is going to be a forward deployed engineer or like has the skill set.
Yeah, I would agree. So let's kind of pivot. So the first story we had up was a little bit about Google, but I think we'll make it quick. So I've also been hearing about this HTML is the new Markdown. Have you seen this? All these tweets. So I was like, all right, let's mess around. So I asked the different model providers to kind of create like a version of all these that we're going to talk about. So this first one makes me laugh. Oh, I said, create me an HTML with visualizations for us to present all the announcements around Google I/O, and this is what it created. And it's really cool because it's interactive and browser agent, target. It's like, oh, presentation view is slide deck view. So they put in four of these. So WebMCP. So it's kind of interesting. Show the hype, and then it's pretty amazing. I don't know how exactly. Again, these tokens add value to GDP. So this was actually Gemini's version. Then I asked it to do it for Claude to do it. So this is Google's big week. Going heavy on the agent stack, consumer AI crown. Google went from can't ship anything to shipping complete agent platform in like less than a year. So their token went up 7 times, like 7x, in the last, from May to May 2025 to 2026. So, it's not the best, but it's pretty legit, like trying to represent this. And I think Gemini Spark was kind of one of the big ones. So this is supposedly going to be, a personal AI agent, just kind of running in the background constantly, helping you with, tasks. I haven't played with it yet, pulling in data across all these different things. One of the more interesting comments was around that Google's not trying to go head to head with Anthropic on the coding front, like at the frontier. They're kind of trying to do their own thing, which I thought was interesting. And then I read a lot of this week about LLM inflation, and just, even though the price per token has dramatically gone down for frontier intelligence, right? And so the price of intelligence has dropped significantly. Everyone's spending more because everyone's just piping everything through the frontier model. Oh, like what is it? Is it Opus 4.8 next week? We'll use that. The month after that's 4.9. We'll use that. And so they actually never achieve the savings of, oh, we could still be using 4.6 for this, or Sonnet 4.6, or Haiku. And the same thing, pick your poison, ChatGPT 5.5 versus 5.4 versus Nano versus Mini. So it's one of the kind of things out in the Twitter sphere or articles was Google's bracing, that comment I made earlier for the token hangover. Like, are we going to see this like dramatic, not fall in tokens, but revenue as CFOs start budgeting for 2027? They say, this is the number. And if we go over it, you have to stop, right? Or you have to prove the revenue you got from it. Just like we had that whole AI initiative, like, ROI a couple of years ago or a year ago, right? Tell me the cost savings or the revenue target you're signing up for. I just don't see CFOs being able to just give like a blank check to engineering anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. I mean, maybe some will get away with it. I mean, similar to like, think about marketing, they just like blow through budgets and never show ROI. So it's like,
You're in marketing, bro.
but right, like,
I think you should be a CMO. I think that's what you should be.
yeah. But I mean, I feel that there'd probably be more value to come out of token maxing than market maxing. But no, yeah. And you know what? There's a analyst on Bloomberg this week. I wish I would have caught her name, but she'd made the comment too, like how you mentioned, like their teams and builders are continually going to want to be on the frontier model. So even if we're saying like, the price of like inference or, price of chips is coming down, doesn't matter because nobody wants to use what was last week's like bowl of soup, right? They want like to continually build on the frontier. Nobody's like, oh, I'm completely happy just staying, 3 models behind and getting the cost savings. Because everybody's like, well, if we can innovate and build better on the frontier, we should be built on the frontier versus, cost savings and sitting here, 3 models back.
Yeah, but I agree. I see that, but so you can only cut so much, right? Before you're just bare bones. And so there, at some point, there has to be a reckoning of there's an ROI or there isn't, right? And so if if there's an ROI, then yeah, the frontier is the frontier. Keep going at it. I don't know that there's an ROI. I don't know that. I mean, margin can't be helping margins. Shipping maybe. So if the best of the best are moving faster, building faster, and can claim market share, then totally. But then all the tokens by the losers will stop, right? I mean, because they'll go out of business. So it's an interesting dynamic. I really do wonder how it's going to pan out. And then two, again, I'm kind of writing this article on LLM inflation and doing research on the side. So they're saying SaaS margins are typically 80% plus. I think is a little high, but whatever. I guess I work more with like cybersecurity and data intensive workloads because they process a lot of data and security. But the AI native company, their margins I think was closer to like 46%. But what's been interesting quarter over quarter in the past 2 years, they've gone up into the 50s range. And so now there's this kind of ratio of take your top line, your inference base, so think credit revenue, anything you have to run an LLM against, and then divide that by your cost. The idea being, of your top line revenue, 20%. So the magic number being 5x is the magic number. But I mean, a lot, the average is 4.6. So in the short span of 2 years, these like AI-led companies that are never going to be profitable are now like improving their gross margins. And so SaaS companies are trying to launch their own. So it's kind of this really interesting. And how are they doing that? I don't know that the LLMs, I mean, it could be attributed directly to the price for intelligence going down, but there's 4 hypotheses on how they can do that. Like you can meaningfully decrease your inference cost. So, which I can share if you're interested.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting to, yeah. I mean, you mentioned SaaS. So one other thing, the SaaS apocalypse we've talked about previously, or if we're just like comparing or, the two, this week sort of a tangent, but relatable. And this is like, I'll tie it back to like, I wonder the cost associated with this. So typically use Postman for testing out like API requests and just using that to troubleshoot. I got a new Mac. We've been lazy. I haven't downloaded Postman. Customer pinged me, just DM me. It was like, hey, we're having issues. I like can't get this to work. So I grabbed their API key and I was like, oh shit, I Postman set up. I just opened up Claude Code and typed in the response, like, the,
I think
API
this
request.
API point.
Yeah. And did everything I normally would do in Postman, but did in natural language, and it worked. And the response it gave me back, it gave feedback. Well, I had to troubleshoot a few more. There were some issues, but it was giving me troubleshooting issues, which Postman doesn't do. Postman just gives you the error and says like, here's your, 404. This was like, oh, like, have we tried this? Have you looked at this? And I was like, oh, this is like, and I just had never thought of using Claude Code like that. But to my point is, okay, do I ever need to use Postman again? And how much did it cost me in tokens to do that versus like my subscription with Postman?
Yeah, it's a great question because it goes back to almost utilization. So I've been kind of on this productivity. So is Cowork and GitHub, Copilot, and Amazon Quick, is that going to replace other tools, to your point? Or is it going to be a new tax like Slack or unified communications and Excel and PowerPoint, right? So the initial kind of adoption of Word mostly displaced like typists, right? And there's this interesting analogy I was going back and forth with Claude on like what did unified communications displace, and it said air travel. I thought it was kind of like, oh, I hadn't really thought about that. So it's like it reached its high pre-pandemic. It's never come back. So there's a direct competition. And so to your point, if you were doing this all the time, I'm sure Postman would be way cheaper, right? Kind of, let's just say on average, like, generally say that's correct. Like if you only use it every once in a while, right? Now maybe Claude Code's cheaper because it's kind of included. It helps you with smart. It's like, you're really spending a couple bucks. It's your generalist Swiss Army knife. And then what's crazy to think about is 10 months from now, 12 months from now, maybe you're not using Opus 5.3, you're using Haiku, 4.1, right? And so now it's even cheaper. And so like Claude Code can actually just, usurp even more use cases. So it's kind of interesting, because at the same time though, there's this stat that like customers hate usage-based pricing. We'd rather overpay for a subscription than to get charged an upcharge when we go over it. It's like a weird human thing. And so it's kind of, and the irony being, I'm in cloud and you're in DeFi. It's all token usage based, but these two concepts in your brain. It's like really hard to hold them at the same time and figure out like what's going to win out. Or yeah, I guess the old adage, are we going to turn into the streaming market where there's a lot of big players, or are we going to do the search market where it's dominated by one player, Google?
Yeah. It's interesting. It's early, I mean, but yeah, hard to call it.
It really is. So maybe let's pivot. So the next one I had up here, let's see, pull up. So kind of around the GTM. So the job market, kind of talk about, go-to-market roles kind of declining from Kyle Porter. So I did another presentation. I thought this was pretty good. So this is interesting. You can go check out growth Unhinged, and he's got access to the full report. I haven't downloaded it, but just pulling from his information. And then I asked Claude to create this, which I thought was pretty cool. So, overall job growth apparently is down 15% for GTM. And I think he used Sumble for this to pull the data. And customer support posts being the greatest decliners. But at the same time, you have these high growth companies, crushing it in terms of like how many people. So they're more than doubled their SDR headcount. So I just wonder, is this really the end of GTM? Which I don't think it is based on everything we've talked about, or is this just a shift to where the growth is, which is perfectly normal, right? If you're not growing as fast, then you're not going to be able to invest as much, versus if you're hyper growth, then you're going to invest.
Yeah. I'm curious too on these, the SDR, in the nomenclature that we use it as, or is typically, just the like first line of engagement, and then SDR sort of like maturates into like handing it over to like the account team or the BDs or like whatever, however your flow works. So when they're hiring out like SDRs, to your point, like it's a hyper growth, how long does that last before they say, okay, now we scale back?
Yeah. So the SaaStr AI conference, Anthropic CRO presented on Anthropic Stack, and it was interesting because they doubled down on a lot of like existing technologies, but Jim, to kind of your example with Postman, use kind of Claude as the peanut butter on top of it to really interact with it and prep and then log. And so they kind of turned into a lot of systems of records or point solutions. So yeah, I mean, growth fixes a lot of problems, right? And then, lack of growth creates a lot of problems. This one is part of it. It was kind of interesting. What's left, right? And so within a trend on the job map, kind of what you've got the AI solution engineering that you talked about, right? So you're always going to need the sales. We've got GTM engineering is more than double, forward deployed roles, growth marketing. So these are like, I just wonder, kind of based on our discussion, is it really, are we focused on the metrics, which are kind of like aggregated and hard to pull out the signal from the noise? Whereas these are four signals coming from all this data, right? So an account, you need sellers, right? Because the human touch, you need people who are technical or SEs. You got GTM engineering. How do I automate these things? You've got forward deployed engineers where, change management is hard for humans and companies to adopt. And so you got to put people in there that can figure it out. And then growth marketing, right, is just something everyone's got to grow. So that was pretty interesting to me. So
Yeah. So the four fields to spend time learning about.
yeah,
So you have a
yeah.
totally random. We can talk about this offline. I'd love to see your prompt that you used.
Let's see if I can. There's one on it's pretty light.
Yeah.
See if I
Just
can find it.
turn this blog into a post.
Here we go. Real time AI. All right, so it started with this. So I think I did this morning. Just like, hey, what are the highlights? Because I stumbled across the video and I was listening to a couple of the presenters, and I was like, okay, cool. Like, I want to know what came out of it. I don't have time to kind of comb through all the data. And then this is all the steps that it did. And what did I ask? Oh, and I asked, so I said, what are the highlights and what was the GTM stack for Anthropic? So he gave me all this stuff. And then I said, all right, summarize the Anthropic GTM stack and how they use it, then create an HTML page to visualize it. And boop, that's where we are. So now we're, the new stack. Oh, sorry,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, it's just, I was just repeating your prompt in my head.
You got Clay, you got Salesforce, Gong, right? Slack for communication, Jira for ticketing, G Suite. So it's pretty crazy, man.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, this blew me away. So Anthropic's, whatever their 44 billion run rate, 54% self-serve.
Yep.
So
I saw
20 billion self-service. Just
and I can imagine I bet there's probably even more. I bet they're somehow internally they're shielding that to justify, maintaining headcount. Like I guess the analogy I would use, because you could see it like an enterprise customer signs up and then they just continue to grow, and then the account team or someone sees it and they're like, oh my gosh, Starbucks is using us and they're burning through a ton. Like, let's move them to like an enterprise account. We got to talk to them. But it was never really like any like enterprise seller doing it. It was just like the teams were just consuming it, and they just, oh, this is high growth. And then it's like, oh, well, it was our account team that moved them to the enterprise tier.
no, man. I think you can sign up for Claude for Enterprise without even talking to anybody at Anthropic, because I think one of my customers did that. At least it doesn't even have to be a big account, and they don't jump in and say, oh, this is 9 figures, we need to pay. Maybe, I don't know, maybe they do, right? But just for 100,000 they wouldn't do that. So
Yeah.
I get so this is what they said they use. What I'm curious what you think. And again, it's so different because I have two customers, so I'm deep by design, but it's like the day runs on Claude, and so I get my morning brief, sip my cup of Joe, and then I don't know what the fuck to talk to my customers about, so I do call prep, and then I draft and validate for proposals, and then forecast call. I reconcile the consumption versus historical cohort patterns, and then I get coaching points weekly on like how I could have done better. This I see. I mean, I think because you can catch so many customer calls and you just miss things. So even though I
Yeah.
don't like coaching just in generally as like a value add, but I mean, just like how fucking hard is this stuff, man?
Yeah. I mean, again, I think that's that SDR layer, like like, hey, we're just starting out. So on all of that, yeah, I saw that too, and I was like, I was like, if I, if I need it to prep for my customer call, like that feels like not I don't want to call it transactional, but it's more like, oh my gosh, I'm following up with this new lead, like pull me the basho so I can, flatter them in the first 2 minutes about like, oh, your revenue was amazing last quarter. Da, 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 da. Like, you know,
Right?
uh, so yeah, a lot of it is very, I think, like entry level, like first sales deck type calls, that sort of like thing, which is fine. And I think, that's sort of the SaaStr audience too, is it's like founders starting businesses who need to learn how to sell or build like their sales team out. And they're like, oh, look, we can just do it now with Claude and all these, orchestrate all these tools together and have one seller. I don't know. That's my take. But the coaching thing, I agree, not a fan of, but I think we've talked about it for the ultimate tool that probably is coming soon is the co-pilot that sits with you during your call is prompting you to probe.
Yeah.
You should be asking this. They just mentioned this. Oh yeah, let me like go deeper. So I think that kind of AI coaching would be useful regardless of what stage you're at, because it's just those like the prompt, the impetus of like, oh, doesn't matter how good of a seller you are. You could just be like, don't forget to ask this, or they just touched on this.
Yeah. So great point. So one of the interesting things I talked about the second brain, and I've done that on my personal computer and on my work computer for a little bit. So, but Amazon Quick desktop is they're again, I have two customers, so it's building out a knowledge graph, and I connect my SharePoint, my OneDrive, my email, my Slack, so it pulls everything in, all the context, and so we do our meeting notes come in and via email after a call. So it's got all this stuff. So daily, as it gets new messages related to my customers, enhancing my knowledge graph. So one example that probably saved, at least for me, I don't know how you work, hours of iteration and kind of then I would still be second guessing is an executive briefing center, right? So where you fly out and you do a customer, it's a full day. You got the C-suite, what sessions should you have? And so Quick does a great job of pulling all the relevant context into it based on all your meeting notes. And then I said, just draft. And then what I did is I had a call with all my specialists for 30 minutes, took the transcript of like, what do you want to get out of it? What do you want to get out of it? What do you think we should talk about? Roadmap, services, executive buy-in, right? Whatever it was, dumped it into a transcript, gave the transcript to Quick. I said, build me an executive briefing center agenda with relevant topics, spit it out within minutes, posted that into Slack as a canvas because everybody can then comment on it. And so I was like within, 2 days and maybe full in like an hour and a half of my time. And then I can also use, because we've got MCPs to our phone tool, it can go search for people in Seattle that are relevant for on like managed Kafka and then recommend who should be speakers. So then I know who I can go reach out to because they're already there. Are they free on this date? Like for me, that compressed what could easily be a 10 to 20 hour activity if you factor in everyone's time to like sub fives, maybe even less than four. And my confidence level goes up in the execution. And now I can focus on other things like what am I going to have for lunch? So,
No, I mean, that's an amazing, I mean, that's an awesome example. And like real world, like, you know, applying it, it's, yeah. So, I mean, again, and now does that replace somebody's role? I don't know. Like,
oh, but I could definitely see where I could support more customers now. So,
maybe,
So,
yeah. So maybe it does take somebody's role because now headcount's decreased because Quinn is a high performing, high agency count
yeah,
rep. If there's three of you that only manage two customers, well, maybe now there can be two of you that manage three each.
yeah. And I would say, so typically it would take me 3 to 4 months to ramp on a customer, I would say, if they were highly engaged. So that's me understanding their business. And I haven't had to do this in the age of AI yet, but that was like meeting with executives, taking intro phone calls, understanding their technical architecture, their data pipelines, their machine learning stack, competitive footprints, on-prem, VMware, Microsoft, database sector, like all that stuff, right? Then who's your ICP, who's the alliance, like, it's just a massive amount of data. Amazon Quick would, like, I think could dramatically lower the cognitive burden of all that. If like I still have to learn it, so it's not like it made learning Spanish easy, but now I have it on speed dial anytime I have a question. Oh, hey, what was the technology that they would use? It was competitive, but like it's like, oh, Databricks. And so that recall and so the reinforcement learning in your as a human, I think would happen faster. And so I think that would compress it. So yeah, I could totally see, they could give me another big customer, or I could actually probably take would be easier would be to take like a smaller customer and ramp them faster. So I could take like another customer, once every 6 months and ramp them from like 10 million to like 30 million or something.
Yeah. No, I think and it's all done though through orchestration. And so like, yeah. And to your point, and it's, you're not learning, it's not helping you learn Spanish. Well, maybe it helps you learn Spanish quicker, but you can engage more fluently.
Yeah, so it definitely compresses the time, but it doesn't replace, or guitar and things I'm learning now anyways, but it doesn't replace the connections in the brain that you have to make through rote practice. But it's way easier to get better at guitar when it's 7 feet from your desk on a stand and not in a case at the school, right? And so like I can immediately walk over and ask it, hey, what was that DB technology or what was this? Just like I can go pick up a guitar. So it makes it easier, less friction. And then I think the reinforcement starts compounding faster, right? So instead of weekly, it's daily. So then you grow faster, you get there faster.
Yeah. It's information at your fingertips. Cause yeah,
Yeah.
again, you're not hunting through notes or searching or trying to recall where it was. I'm going off on like a tangent because yeah, I think it's a beautiful example because you can literally just go in and be like, what was what was XYZ? Like, what was the database they're running? Versus like, oh, I just got to go look through these different Salesforce records or these notes and, dig through. I think I saw it was in the October interview.
Well, and I know it comes back to the quality of the output is based on the quality of the input, and essentially that's a reflection of the knowledge of the person on a certain subject. I know you've experienced this. I'm assuming our audience has experienced this. Like you've walked into a conversation where you know a lot about the topic you answer, and you're like, oh yeah, you should do X, Y, Z. It could have been about your, getting rid of weeds, a bug infestation, riding a bike, CrossFit, like whatever it was. How do you learn? Oh, I can't do muscle ups, kipping, toes to bar, right? And so what's interesting is like if you take someone like us that's experienced BD, and specifically I've been in infrastructure and platform services, analytics and security, I can high agency, I can 10x my coverage as a sales rep because like all 80% of the job is easy for me. And it was when I did get stuck, oh shit, I need to go talk to a solution architect who needs to open up a spec rec for a TFC technical field community to get the answer. Now I can get most of that in quick. I can get back to the customer. I can connect the dots faster. And so it's all the same work, but it's allowed me to like get leverage from my knowledge to my action output. And so it's going to be interesting how and where and when the sales teams organize that way because you couldn't take an SDR at AWS, give them the exact same tools and have the same output. It just wouldn't work. It's just
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, that goes back to like the, reference we were talking about at the start of the year where I think it was SaaStr again was like, oh, we fired all our SDRs. And we talked about like, well, the entry level is disappearing. So how do they get that acumen as a good BD or account rep or account manager to become an account manager if they never, because there is that like maturation phase where you sort of have to go through, because you're not going to take an SDR and be like, here's an enterprise account, run it.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a good kind of segue into maybe the last kind of story. So this was from the SaaStr AI conference. The chief revenue officer who has a podcast, he only does it maybe once a month, and it's so I want to check it out. But so his business is focused on owners of like small food service companies. So just think like a takeout place, your local pizzeria, your local Chinese shop or Greek shop, right? And I don't know, it's owner.com, so I don't know what their solution is. But the point is that it's a lot of SMBs, right? So it's not going deep on one customer, it's being really shallow on a lot of customers. And so he has this framework on kind of how companies should look at AI automation in their sales and GTM funnel. And so it was interesting. This was Claude. Letting 1,000 flowers bloom is how you stall out. So essentially, telling everyone to do AI and not having a centralized team to focus is not going to work. It's not going to allow you to get to the next level. So he's got these 5 levels. So L0 is ad hoc, right? Oh, I use ChatGPT for random stuff. You know, custom skills, good prompts are kind of shared among teammates on Slack, used consistently. And then L2 is you start getting the automated workflows. Then L3 is centralized infrastructure. You have a single context library, a lot of data, a lot of process. And then L4 is self-improving. He said, I don't know anybody that's self-improving. Nobody's there. So I'm going to talk, how do you get to L3? And the chasm here is between L1 and L2. And typically he said you can't cross it if you're fully decentralized. You need a team of really specialized people of like good at automating these things. And like, we'll go, essentially it's like an internal forward deployed engineer. Go sit with the sales team, tell me about the things you dislike about your job that you get the most time. And then they go back and they try to automate that and fix it. And so it's like, that's cool. And he talks a little bit more about the whole like lack of trust and people talking about, the AI job apocalypse isn't helping anyone. So there's a whole centralized. So he also had a great framework for like build versus buy. And so downtime was a big one. So if downtime is really important, if it's going to take a lot to build it, if it's not really differentiating your internal process or reach out, then you should just buy it, right? Salesforce, it needs to be up all the time. Twilio for a call router, it needs to be up. They're really good at it. Why do I go do that? So like for him, it was all pre-call research. So really the last mile, taking the data in their CRM. He emphasized third-party data really well too. He said, because he's like, it's more important than ever to really understand your ICP and understand the context of the actual business you're trying to reach out to, so you can really enrich and make this valuable and not AI just slop. And so more emphasis on fixing the data first before you're reaching out. So I thought that was transcribing calls straight into Salesforce fields. Like that's something you should be doing. And he also had this thought process on, you're not trying to eliminate the job, you're trying to unbundle it. So go to a job posting, you see it kind of deconstructs into all these different tasks. So all you're trying to do is you're trying to separate the tasks out that are easy for the machine, easy for the human, and then allocate those. And then you can rebundle new tasks into whatever new role you want. But that's the focus, not trying to automate away the job, which I thought was, really well. Like, I don't know anybody that likes, researching 1,000 companies. This one was kill the lostness. I like this visual that they created. So, you put in your raw input, then it guesses the ICP, guesses the pain, proposes, writes, and comes up with AI slop. So you really got to have like a deterministic check, human in the loop, good data to start. So, and then he's got a nice kind of like scorecard framework on how do you prioritize everything. So, but I highly recommend. It's part of the SaaStr AI, conference, speak owner.com. That's what I Googled, and I popped in Gemini and said, hey, when did it start? And then it gave me a link to it. So, because they didn't put fucking chapters on it. So it's like, I'm not listening to 3 hours.
Yeah, no, that was a good one. These are good takeaways. I like what you did this week. Those were nice. I do have to jump. I have to go interview somebody. So we're going to have to cut this one. But
Yeah.
this was good. I love those. The HTML. Now your job is you just need to go publish those.
Yeah, I
Like,
got the couple in. Yeah, I got to figure that out. So I've been trying to, I'll let you go. It was just every day I got to write. Every day I just try to design something. So I do Duolingo. I practice guitar. I try to practice guitar. I got to write, I got to read, and I got to like pencil something. I'm trying to build the atomic habits. And so this week, at least I got like 2 out of the 3 days. I started on Wednesday. So it's going to keep going. No, man. Y'all, next time.